Hey Guppy.
Hello, friend.
Hey, I don't have a cold open. So say something stupid or silly or funny. Quick.
Get cold. Open? Wait, what?
Cold open? I
What's
need
that?
one.
What's that?
It's like on The Office when they like open with something before the intro and then they get to do the intro and then they do the rest of the episode. And all our devlogs have been that way so far because Kill or Titus says something funny and I've put it there. But since it's just me, like I can't really do that, naturally. So
Hmm.
now you have to fill that void in my life. Hello! It's just me this time because the other two people are being dumb and having like responsibilities and stuff. And anyway, so it's just gonna be me this time, and I thought that because it's only me, I would maybe approach this particular devlog a little bit differently. I'm going to be doing the standard, showing you guys what I've done, but also I'm going to approach it with a bit more of a technical, sort of in-depth look. I mean, it's not going to be a tutorial or anything like that, but it will be, you know, kind of showing off the technologies that went into doing this and like, our thought process and everything behind what I've done. Um, and it will be a little bit more of a technical thing. So for the first, part of it is just going to be business as usual, and then if you don't want to stick around for the other part of the video where I go into, a bit more of how I did it, then by all means, I'm not going to be offended if you click off. But please, let me know in the comments below if you prefer this kind of a devlog, because I know that Kill would be interested most likely in doing devlogs more of this way. Um, I think he's probably a bit more comfortable talking about how he's done things than what he's actually done, and certainly more comfortable than doing the outro, which I guess he's off the hook for this one. But next time he'll be back doing the outro. But anyway, without further ado, in the last 2 weeks or so, I have been revisiting the HUD for about the fourth and final time. Now, this is a screenshot of what it looked like before, and it's maybe not the worst thing in the universe. It's certainly not god awful bad, but it's I believe someone used the word dated to describe it, and I would completely agree with them. The top bar is not too bad, but the bottom bar is very old style. And that is, very apparent by the fact that we did take inspiration from some games that were made, a decade or even 2 decades ago in the past. And while those were great games and the HUDs worked for those games, our game is supposed to be not only a modern game, but set even in the future. So our UI should reflect that. It shouldn't be reflective of a game from 20 years ago. And also the HUDs and the UIs for the games we took inspiration for this HUD from, like older Command and Conquer games and StarCraft Brood War in particular, things like that. Those games are very different than ours in that they are focused on a competitive sort of usually 1v1 short match, whereas our game is very expansive and it's not meant to be like a combative type of setup. It's not meant to be designed around the idea of building a building and then placing it like a Command and Conquer would be. And while that is a process that you would go through in the game, it's not, down here for example, there's room for like 20 or something buildings, whereas the typical use case for our game would not be more than a few at a time unless you're doing something strange. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to have all this room taken up and look like this, look as if they're supposed to be filled, when in most cases you may not even have anything filling these grid spaces after you've gotten a planet working and all that. because you may not have the buildings ready and in your storage. So I've been drawing up a lot of sort of concepts on my whiteboard, and I'll spare you I'll spare you the details of looking at all my terrible drawings. But basically, we've been reworking and rethinking what we want to do and what we want to take inspiration from. And I happen to be rewatching. I think I was just rewatching Iron Man. Just I think I just put it on one of my monitors and was doing something else. And then it sort of like, I sort of realized that the Iron Man HUD and the UI that goes into those movies is extremely similar to what we could do with relative ease, and it looks very futuristic, and it would make a whole lot of sense to incorporate this kind of a style. And if you just Google image search, Iron Man HUD, you can see a whole bunch of examples of what I'm talking about here. The two main elements I took away from watching that and watching the movies and paying particular attention to the UIs is there's a lot of circles, and there's a lot of, like, whenever there's a squarish or rectangular element displaying information, one of the corners is often cut off diagonally. And not to mention you have, like, the standard coloration and the scan lines and things of that nature that make it just appear a whole lot more futuristic. So we wanted to take inspiration from this, and also we wanted to have the whole HUD be extremely exciting to look at, extremely animated, and lots of movement, and even just idle movement, just to make the whole thing appear a lot more interesting. But one thing we definitely wanted to stay away from was having the animation take precedence over the functionality. So we've sort of set a sort of rule, and that is that when the HUD is animating in, and I'll show you that in a second, when the HUD is animating into the game, we don't want it to take up any more than, maybe a half a second, or maybe at the most 3/4 of a second of the user's time before they can actually start playing the game. We don't want the animation to take like 7 seconds, because one of the activities that the player is going to be doing often in our game is moving from planet to planet, going to a new planet, and if they have to wait, an exorbitant amount of time for the HUD to load in every single time before they have to do anything, it would get extremely frustrating. So I'll show you it in-game first, and I'll get to why I make that distinction in a moment. And bear in mind that it will be less smooth when I'm recording this here, because we are using the preview, new editor preview in Unreal, and that has a lot of debugging elements and things like that that slow down the technology we're using pretty dramatically. But in the standalone game, it would be as smooth as in a browser, in theory. We have tested that, and it is basically, the theory holds up. So yeah, so I'll let you, there's an element of sound as well, so I will shut up for a second and I'll let you experience what it would be like so far with what we have to go to a planet and start that up. So here you go.
Initializing surface control. Stand by.
Alright, so that's the new HUD so far. On the left here, none of it's actually filled in yet or anything. This is basically just the, more or less the base. No information is as of yet being transmitted from the game to the HUD. But, and this FPS is not the actual full game's FPS. Right now it's, well, okay. That's fun. This is actually just the FPS of the HUD, and again, when I go into the technical details, I'll explain that. But basically, none of this is actually filled in. On the left here would be your action buttons. That would be where you go to view your docked ships, things like that, show your inventory perhaps, just different buttons that do things. Here within this little spinny circle thing would be the minimap, and over here would be a view of the current planet that you're on, and perhaps some information about the atmosphere, livability, habitability, things like that would perhaps go here. And on the bottom would be where your buildings actually go. And as you can see, when it animates in like that, it sort of pushes them all sort of aside. So no matter how many you have up to a certain point, they'll all fit nicely in the center, and then as you increase more, they'll just sort of come in. And like I said, the use case would typically be for having less than you even see here, because the standard method of playing this game would be to, assemble a structure that you'd place, and then when it shows up in this HUD, you'd place it. It typically wouldn't be hoarding like 20 or 30 structures and not placing them, because it's useless to do that. So while that is not the expected use case, we will account for it. Basically, once it gets too many, there will be basically just a button that says more, and it'll open up a separate menu where you'll be able to see all of them no matter how many you have. But this is the standard method of play, is just having them all on the bottom there. In the future, i.e. in the next 2 weeks or so, expect to see some additional elements added. We will have a notification system that will probably be somewhere around here. It'll pop up in a similar style, and resources, like the top 5 quantity of like resources that you have on the planet, would display in the top right, and that could be, there'd be a little arrow that you could sort of slide that off, and then a button that you could expand and see all your resources, all your entire inventory, all your components and everything as well. And additionally, expect to see these actually filled in with the models and icons and information. This is quite early. It's basically just the base. On the left here, perhaps I should explain the colored bars. This is similar to the other HUD, where the green, I believe, is power. Yeah, the green is power, and the blue is shields for the planet. And so they, of course, go around in a clockwise and counterclockwise fashion around the little spinnies. But this is basically the HUD. And that's about it for the portion of the video where I just talk about what I did. So about how I did it. If you've ever worked with Unreal, if you've ever worked with UI and Unreal, anything like that, Unreal 4 in particular, UMG, maybe I'm alone in this. I haven't really talked to, anybody who really does this. Maybe I'm alone here, but I think it's pretty bad. All things considered. When I first started it up, I was like, this is terrible. What else can we do? Can we, write our own UI system? Like, what are we going to do here? Because this is just really bad for what we want to do. For a game where the menus were less of a focal point, it would be fine. But UMG, I feel like, is not that good for procedurally generating menus and for having dynamic content and having, a whole lot of menus. Because our game is essentially the menus. You place stuff in the world and the ships battle and stuff, and that's all great. But most of the gameplay itself would actually take place managing your, resources and inventory and things, and that's all menus. So we needed something that we could easily work with and looks really good with minimal effort, and UMG did not fit either of those things, in my opinion. UMG is extremely difficult to work with when you're talking about dynamically generating something, and just shapes and things like that are just a nightmare to work with. You're basically you're basically forced to make a texture for something that you really shouldn't have to. So we did some research. We looked around for alternatives. And I was considering for a while just writing a plugin in C++ to sort of embed the Chromium browser, or Osmium, or whatever technology, but that's based on Chromium anyway, so it doesn't matter. And just sort of embed a web page as the HUD, because I've done that before. I've used it anyway in Gary's mod and things like that. And it worked out pretty well, all things considered. I mean, it has its, issues to deal with, to overcome, but so does anything. So I looked into whether or not somebody had already did that, and turns out somebody did. It's a project called Blui, B-L-U-I. I don't know who did it off the top of my head, actually. Here. I'll find it. Blui. Aaron Shea. I hope I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. But basically, it's an HTML-powered UI and HUD for Unreal Engine 4, which is great. It's got, binaries that are released and everything, and it's a plugin, you drag and drop, and then it allows you to write your HUD or UI in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And that was great for me because before I decided to be a game developer, I was a web developer for 2-3 years. So I'm pretty much right at home writing any of that, and so it allows us to do HUDs and everything like that right in. This is the actual HTML. That's all it even is. This is the top bar, which is mostly static, and this is actually funny. I'm getting a little sidetracked here, I know, but UMG is good for stuff like this. UMG is good for stuff that HTML and CSS is good for, like just those two things. Making static elements and even animating them to an extent, it's fine. But when you start doing everything else, because this is just the bar on the top, this is just the population and the happiness and the food. That's all what I'm highlighting is, and obviously there's some CSS to style it, but UMG fills that role fine. It does not, however, fill anything else, and that's, as you can tell, there's nothing else in the actual HTML just in this file. It's all generated via JavaScript, because, again, it has to be dynamic. And right now it's just debug. This is where it places the, things on the bottom, and this would be where it places the buttons on the side. As well as up here, I believe somewhere. I might have it folded. Yeah, I do. Okay, this is the top bar animation, which could be done with CSS, but I just did it with JavaScript because I'm more familiar. And okay, here's the spinnies. Yep. So this is what makes those little spinning arcs in the bottom left and bottom right of the screen. And none of this would be even remotely as easy. Like, maybe this looks complicated if you don't code, but if you're a programmer, if you're familiar with JavaScript, jQuery, it's very, very basic, really. It's basically just drawing some arcs and spinning them around. But in UMG, this would be very difficult without images and materials and textures, and not fun stuff, in my opinion. And I'm sure there's some guys saying, well, it's easy, you just do this and that. It's like, yeah, okay, but to me this is far, far easier, so we decided to use this technology. It had its hurdles to overcome. I believe we have mostly dealt with them, but I am extremely happy, and the really cool thing as well is it allows us to test our HUD pretty much instantaneously, separate from the game, right in the browser. I mean, I know that, clicking this button is pretty fast, and then you can see it in the game. That's cool. But when you're talking about iterating, 100 or even 1,000 times or more to get something that you're truly happy with, it doesn't beat hitting F5 and having the HUD just immediately relaunch and reload and see your changes right in real time like that. It's very, very cool. This FPS is actually just an FPS meter for the JavaScript animation. You can also switch to Delta time, I suppose. I didn't actually know that until right now. That's fun. But that is that is separate from the game thread. The blue eye runs in its own separate thread, so any animation lag or anything like that is completely separated from the game, which is also really cool, I think. And the game lagging, on the other hand, shouldn't affect that thread. It might, because your whole computer could be lagging at that point, but I digress. The whole system is really very cool. Great job to Aaron Shea for a really great plugin. It's really going to speed up development of our UI in our game, and that is always a good thing. I think I'm basically done. I think I've talked about everything I want to talk about. So anyway, I guess Kill is off the hook, so I guess it's my turn to do the outro. Um, so anyway, thank you for watching. My name is Apophix. I'm not joined by Monotrox and Soggy Piggy, but if I were, we three would make up Digital Empire Development. You can check us out with the links that are hopefully going to be on your screen if I remember to do that. And especially check out Twitch. We do stream 5 out of 7 days a week. We stream dev streams, so if you're interested in, you know, maybe a more technical kind of devlog like this, maybe you'd be even more interested in watching us create this game in real time. You can, you know, keep up with it. And if you really like this game and really like this concept and anything like that, you can support us on Patreon. The link is there as well. You know, any size contribution certainly helps. And we definitely appreciate that. So I'll see you guys in 2 weeks or earlier if you check us out on Twitch or wherever. So see you then. Thanks for watching.